Hello, hello, hello. This is Danny Ceballos with the Best Boss Podcast. And I am so excited to interview and bring you a new favorite author of mine named Lauren Gassner Otting. And I had the opportunity to meet Laura in a book club discussing her book, Wonder Hell. And we chatted about that. And she's also the author of another terrific book called Limitless around leadership development. Anyway, so excited to have Laura here. Laura, just say hello and we'll get your voice in the room.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, dear listener, let me tell you a little bit about Laura, and then we're going to get into some Q&A around leadership resilience and finding your limitless mojo again. All right, so Laura's secret superpower is seeing your greatness and reflecting it back on you so that you get unstuck and achieve extraordinary results. A frequent contributor to Good Morning America, The Today Show, Harvard Business Review, and Oprah Daily, Laura is the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of 3 books, Wonder Hell, Limitless, and Mission Driven. Laura's 30-year resume is defined by her entrepreneurial edge. She served as a presidential appointee in Bill Clinton's White House, helping shape AmeriCorps, left a leadership role, almost read that you led a leftist role. No, you left a leadership role at a respected national search firm to expand a tech startup and founded, ran, and sold her own global search firm, partnering with the full gamut of mission-driven corporate and nonprofit executives. Laura is turned on by the audacity of the big idea and that larger-than-life goal that you just can't seem to shake. She's an instigator, motivator, and provocateur, and she's never met a revolution that she didn't like. Just ask her enduringly patient husband, 2 almost grown son, and two troublesome pups with whom she lives right outside of Boston, Mass. Yay, Laura! I love you more
That's
and more.
me.
What's going on? Awesome. And I have it was quite. I'm really interested to see where this conversation goes. I have a lot of thinking around activism at work too, and how that plays in. And
Oh, yes.
yeah. So anyway, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit, just to kind of to seed the garden here a little bit, about some of the insights and some of the things that you can pull out of any of your books. But I'm especially curious about Limitless, and I'm especially wondering about working with leaders that are bumping into that ceiling of energy, of motivation, of all those things, and getting really close to burnout, but still having the passion and the drive to do the best that they can. So you tell me.
So this is where I spent all of my time at that moment, and I love it. So my first book, my last book, Limitless, was born out of 20 years in executive search, an executive search career that I had for universities, foundations, nonprofit institutions, healthcare organizations, mission-driven organizations.
Yes.
It was my job in executive search to call the most successful people on behalf of my clients and recruit them away to work for my clients.
Yeah.
Sounds like kind of a hard job, right? Call the most successful people and ask them to consider a whole new job. So here's what would happen. I called these people specifically because they were so successful.
Hmm.
But despite all that success, they weren't very happy. And so they
Hmm.
all called me back. And I was
Hmm.
fascinated about this. Like, why did these people who had so much success and also purpose,
Hmm.
why were they not happy? Like, they should have been the happiest people of all. And so my last book, Limitless, really talks about how it's not this pursuit of success as defined by somebody else, right? Bigger, better, faster, more. Fastest path to the, most expedient path to the corner office is the only one that matters. It was actually a different thing that we should pursue, which is consonance, where everything we do is aligned with everything we are. And we're bringing that best version of ourselves to the problems we actually want to solve. And we're rewarded for it in ways that are personally interesting to us, whether it's karmic, financial, emotional, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
that's Limitless. And then Wonder Hell is
Mm-hmm.
is really sort of the next book in the series of, like, as you're growing in the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Once you find a definition of success, something you actually care about, and you're starting to see some success in that thing that actually
Yeah.
matters to you,
Yeah.
suddenly you're achieving something that you didn't even know you could achieve. And you're like, it's amazing, it's exciting, it's humbling, it's wonderful. And also within that achievement, I see a version of myself that I didn't even know was possible. And
Right.
now maybe I kind of want that.
Huh.
How interesting. But I'm suddenly filled with anxiety and stress and imposter syndrome and doubt and dread and exhaustion and envy and burnout. It's wonderful, but it's also kind of hell. It's
Mm.
Wonder Hell. And Wonder
Mm-hmm.
Hell is the space at that top where the burden of your potential
Mm,
walks in and goes, "Hey, man, what you got for me?
mm,
What are you going to do with this vision of where you can go next? Are you going to just sit here and let it pass you by?
mhm,
Or are you going to
mhm,
jump into it with both feet?" And
mhm,
so we can talk about either one or both of those if you
mhm,
want to talk about it. But this moment in between who you were yesterday and who you
mhm,
just realized you can become tomorrow, like that moment of why success doesn't feel better, this potential, the pressure that we feel,
mhm.
that's where I spent all of my time.
Ah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm wondering if you can help me bridge. So, a leader, a manager doing well, having a vision for themselves on what they can become with the right circumstances or what they want, bumping into the exhaustion and now needing to make that leap between what I am and where I want to go and what how to work through those fears. I keep thinking as you're talking about, I'm like, that's all great until we bump into the fear, until we bump into the fear, until we bump into the fear.
So this is one of the things that I learned. So when I found myself in Wonder Hell, I was like, I'm a professional keynote speaker. I get to meet all sorts of cool people in the green room. I get, Olympic medalists and startup unicorns and gold medal winners and just like the first of glass ceiling shatterers. I'm going to call them up and figure out what on earth to do. This was also during the pandemic, so I was like, I've got time on my hands because no events, no speaking, like it was fine. So I called them all up. And I ended up interviewing like 100 different glass ceiling shatters, Olympic medalists, startup unicorns, everyday people like us, all in search of a way to just survive this moment. How do I get through
Mhm.
this moment of like bowel shaking fear? And what I realized was that none of them got through it. Because on the other side of this wonder hell was just the next one and the next one and the next one
Exactly.
after that. And they had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. They had to learn to thrive in it
Uh,
instead. And so they did three things. The first was they learned to embrace their ambition. They were like, I'm scared, but I'm so interested in that thing that I could do. I'm just going to embrace that I want it and see what happens. Number one.
mhm,
Number two,
mhm.
rather than hearing the voice inside their head saying, you're an imposter, you don't belong, you haven't done this before, they heard it instead as, you haven't done this before. And it became exciting. So
Mm,
it wasn't a limitation, it was
mhm,
an invitation. And then
mm.
the third piece was they said, oh, this is interesting. And every time I figure out something else, there's another version of me on the other side of it. So rather than bracing for it and trying to survive it, I'm going to learn to look forward to it.
Ah,
And
that's great.
and
Yeah.
right, I'm going to look forward to it. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to pause. I'm going to listen to the emotions that are coming at me and the lessons, and I'm actually going to look forward to thriving in it instead. And so they just changed their entire approach to what it is. And what I thought was the most interesting when I spoke to people was that I started to realize that there is this moment where even if you don't want to make the leap, it's coming at you anyway. So one of the people I interviewed was Whitney Johnson, who was, one of the best business thinkers in the world. And she told me about the S curve, which is like the sort of like you take an S on the side. At the bottom of the S curve, it's flat. You have no idea what you're doing. Everything is really hard. Then you start to like hit the curve, right? It's getting a little bit easier. You're figuring it out. You're starting to get some momentum. You're like, cool, I got it. I can see like that maybe I could do this one day. And then you hit the top of the S and you're like, yes, score. I know how to do what I'm doing. Everything is great. And she said, but you can't stop there because the S eventually ends and you fall off the end. I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, you fall off the end, you fall asleep at the wheel, and you self sabotage. And I was like, nah, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you self sabotage? And so she asked me to tell her about a time when I was just like at the top of my game and ended up telling her about a client experience I had where really I sold a project that I had no business selling. I ended up performing in this meeting in a way that I was fancy dancing, like based on 15 years of experience, but not a lot of research for this one particular client. It would have been malpractice had it not gone well. And I remember on the elevator down calling my business partner and saying, I think I need an exit plan because if that hadn't gone well, it would have been bad for our client. It would have been bad for me. It would have been bad for you. It would have been bad for our people. It would have been bad for all of our clients. Like that was not okay. I was at the top and I was self sabotaging because I kind of fell asleep at the wheel. And
Mm,
so even
mhm,
if you're at the top and you're like, I'm scared,
mhm,
you got to figure out how to make the leap to the next S curve because it ends anyway.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's it, this. It's a yeah that especially that idea of reframing the saboteur, the sabotaging behaviors, thinking, feel. as what did you say, as an invitation rather than a limitation.
Yes.
I think that's power. That's so powerful, and knowing that there's with the path of success, it's inevitable that we'll hit the S curve. That's the path
That's the
that leaders
path.
choose. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And the thing about this sort of imposter syndrome that we're
Yeah.
talking about, right? Do I belong here? I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my God. I
Yes.
talked to Dory Clark, who, again, another great business writer, who said, every time I tried to reinvent myself to do something new, I would look around and I would say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I get to the next step. But she said, but you know what? The last place I was, I didn't know what I was doing either. I
Right.
didn't know how to get here.
Right.
And she said, it's not that everything you've done before got you to here. It's not
Yes.
going to get you to where you're going next, but
Yes.
everything that you've done before is built on a foundation of asking questions, learning,
Mm.
problem solving, right? Figuring it out in a way that like you don't lose those skills. You
Mm.
just apply them to the next thing. When I was selling my
Mhm.
executive search firm,
Mhm.
I called a friend of mine and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm
Mm.
trying to like have this exit. I'm trying to sell. I am totally out of my depth. I don't know what these contracts mean. I don't know what the valuations mean. And he said, Laura, you're not out of your depth. You're just out of your lexicon.
Yeah, yes,
And
yes.
I was like, "Whoa, okay." Like, I was just trying to do something in a foreign language, basically,
Yeah,
and as soon as I
yeah,
understood it, as soon as I applied Google Translate, like, I
yeah,
figured it out. So, I think we have to remember that there's translatable skills and transferable skills, and
yeah,
the next place you go, you're not gonna be able to transfer the skills directly because why would you go there? It'd be boring to go to
yeah,
the next place just to transfer skills. But
right.
if you can translate the skills and then figure out how to solve the next problem using the skills you developed from the
Yes,
last problem, that
yes,
becomes super interesting.
yes, yeah, and not leapfrogging some of that. The gifts and opportunities are right there. Grab them, move on, but you
Yes.
can't start leapfrogging that. Hey,
Yes.
could you comment on, especially in Limitless, where we talk about, kind of recrafting our leadership narrative and who we are and what, really coming from the heart on that. I, 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 s- I struggle with, and I work with clients around authenticity versus effectiveness, and the argument being really that, we get all this about being authentic, bring your full self. And I think you really don't want my full authentic self at work, right? That's safe for like Saturday nights and different, that's not what you want. Is my best, most effective way of being. What are your thoughts on that, on authenticity versus effectiveness?
That's a really interesting question. I look, I know everyone's like, we want you to bring your whole self, except all the messy parts, right? We want you to bring your whole self, except the ones that disagree with our policies. We want you to bring your whole self, except for the ones that are like making us think about, our antiquated, ideas about the world.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
everybody wants your whole self. And like, it's sort of like an executive search. They were like, we want a change agent until someone starts changing things. So, what do you really want? What do you really want? And so I think what I tend to ask people is to change is to start with the solution, right? So you're not saying like, what do you want from me? How can I help? But you're saying, what does success look like? If we were doing this right, what would it look like here? And then you can figure out what parts of you actually belong. Because I think what happens is somebody says, bring your whole self to work, and we bring our whole selves, and suddenly it is, we're like a square peg in a round hole. If
Yes.
you understood it was a round hole, you'd bring a different part of yourself. And so, it's kind of like the fake it till you make it nonsense advice. Like, I might do something I've never done before. I'm
Yeah.
not faking it till I'm making it. I'm just turning up parts of me and turning down other parts of me. So I am an introvert to my core, but I make my living as a motivational speaker, as a leadership speaker. I get on stage and I do the razzmatazz.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't mean that that's who I am. It just means there's part of me that can do that. I turn myself up on stage in that area, and I turn myself down when I get off stage. I'm not sitting in my living room doing that. That's if I brought my whole self wouldn't belong because there's extroverted parts and introverted parts. So figuring out what parts are demanded by the organization, demanded by the solution that is being sought, allows us to understand which parts of ourselves to turn up or turn down so that
I,
we feel like we're more in consonance with the organization. I like to say it would be great if we could bring everything we are to everything we do. It's hard to have 100% alignment with that, right? Like if you're say, a cancer surgeon and you're in a cigar making club, that's pretty tough, right? If you're a dentist who's like loves to has a candy sale operation on the side, I don't know, maybe you're a good businessman. But we
Right.
people talk about work life balance, and I
Mhm.
think we need to find work life alignment. So if we're aligned, if
Mhm.
we're not costume changing and code shifting from who we were at home
Mhm.
to who we are at work,
Mhm.
great. I don't think that we're too busy. We're just busy doing things that don't matter to us, right? So if we can find work that actually is consonant with our values,
Mhm.
with who
Mhm.
we are, with how we want to manifest ourselves into the world, then we can bring more of ourselves, even if not bringing every single bit of ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, 100%. And I am glad to hear you also in that camp. Yeah, for me, it's again, it's about what do you want? What does effective mean to you? What does success mean to you? Start with that and then back in. And I think that's a measure of authenticity as much as anything else is, but it's about being clear about what that means and staying in one's integrity while making choices
Sure.
about parts,
You
right?
know, when I was in search, we'd go into an organization that had just lost its CEO or executive director, and the board chair would say, "Oh no, we need to hire a person, like our person just quit. We have to find exactly the same type of person who was here before."
Yeah,
Or
right.
they'd say, "We need to find exactly the opposite of the person who was here before." And I was like, "Maybe you don't need either."
Yeah. Yes. Right.
What does this organization look like in 12 months, in 18 months, in 24 months, in 5 years if you're successful? What does the organization look like? Okay, now what kind of person do you need to get you there? Because
Yes.
that's a different question than like, let's just fill the role that was left because maybe the person who was there wasn't the right person. Maybe they were. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it turns out that you, board chair, you don't know either, right?
Yeah.
So we have to actually have the conversation to figure out whether or not, who we're looking for, because we have to start with, what does success mean, right? Not how can I help? What can I do? How's it all about me? But what needs to happen for
Yes.
us to be successful in this endeavor? Then,
And
when we know that, we can understand how to apply the right pressure, the right skill set. And, we talked about burnout at the top of this with the
yes.
people who are working in the fields where your
Yeah,
listeners are working. And
yes.
so much of the time, people in this industry have burnout because we're trying to do all the things for all the people, all the animals, all the causes, all the everything all the
Mhm.
time. When
Mhm.
really we have to say, like, what is the specific lever that I can pull to make the maximal amount of change in this one specific area? And
Mhm.
how will
Mhm.
I measure my success? Right? Because we're not going to like save the whales, cool the earth, feed the poor, right? Like, it's really hard to ever judge ourselves as successful when it's like
Mhm.
cure diabetes, right? That's not going to work. But if we have very specific
Mhm.
metrics of what success looks like, using
Mhm.
the levers that we have, the skill set that we have, the access that we have, we can decide whether or not our investment of time, our talent, our treasure is actually moving forward towards that goal. And if not, make some strategic changes so that we are.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I agree 100%. And it suggests another question that I'd like to ask you is from your research in the book, do you have a sense for what are the questions one asks oneself when one thinks one is not in the right place with their leadership? So let's say I'm a
Mm.
leader, I'm a manager, I taking into account that I want to be effective, not just authentic, all the things we talked about. And I'm starting to think that all the ways that I'm being pulled at in this organization for my leadership do not align or do not feel like they align. Do you have a sense for where that tipping point can be, should be, might be for?
Yes. I would ask myself 3 questions. Number 1, what is what is the time when I feel the most effective, the most at myself, the most able to create change? Like, number 1, when do I actually feel like I have the most agency? Number 2, what is the cause that I care about? What is the
Yes.
problem I'm trying to solve? What's the
Mhm.
societal ill that I'm trying to absolve? And then number 3, how do I want to be rewarded for it? Right?
Mm.
So I ask people all the time, tell me about a time when you were at your very best. You were being called upon to bring the very best of everything that you are capable of doing. Number 1, to solve, number 2, a problem about which you care deeply.
Mm,
And number 3, you're being rewarded for solving that problem in a way that is personally, spiritually,
mhm,
karmically, financially interesting to you. That's
mhm,
the moment when you are most in consonance. That's the moment when you're
mhm,
bringing everything you
mhm,
are to everything you do.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
is there a
mhm,
like what is the highest and best use of your time, the
mhm,
greatest skill set you have to solve a problem you actually care about, and you're being rewarded for it in a way that is meaningful to you.
mhm,
And
mhm.
again, that reward could be karmic, it could be emotional, it could be financial, it could be career trajectory, it's opportunity creating, whatever it is. And then I would have a conversation with leadership. And if they see that version of you and they're excited about that version of you and they reward that version of you, if they teach that version of you, if they mentor that version of you, you're in the right place.
Right.
If you bring that version of you to leadership and they're like, what?
Yeah.
I don't think they don't get it, then
Yeah.
you're probably in the wrong place.
Yeah. I
So
love
I
that.
think it's figuring out who you are when you're at your very best. And if that person is
Mhm,
actually received and loved and cared and celebrated.
mhm. Yes. Bravo. Amen. And also I think for everybody listening out there, recognizing that, I think we got all caught up in our worlds and think there is not success outside of this world. I can't see myself being successful in another organization that really values, rewards everything that you just said.
Well,
And I hope everybody.
yes, and we also say, I can't leave because if I leave, who's going to help the people? If I leave,
Well,
who's going to be here?
yes, that's
Because
true
we
too.
think that we're so important, and the truth is, sadly, that the graveyard is filled with indispensable people, and when
That's
you
right.
leave like, there was somebody there before you, there's gonna be somebody there after you, right?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you are not bringing your very best to everything that you're doing, where you are right now, there's probably a place where you can bring everything that
That's
you do
exactly
to
right.
everything that you are, and you'll be even better for that organization. So you're actually both stealing from the current organization by not being your very best, and you're stealing from the other organization by not being there
Right.
and bringing your best. So we
Right.
have to remind ourselves that,
Yeah.
you know, we are not that important, except
Yes.
where we are. And we should make
Yeah.
sure that we are in the place where we are that
In
important.
the right place. In the right place, we are that. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Good. Hey, Laura, based on all the research and all the interviews that you did for all the three books, what uh, any other surprising things that came out for you that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me the most surprising thing was probably this question of imposter syndrome, that every single person I talked to had it. Whether they were starting their second billion-dollar company, whether they
Yeah.
were running from Congress to Senate, whether
Yeah.
they were at the top of a ski slope with a gold medal in their pocket waiting to go on the next gold medal run, right? Everybody had this moment of like, I didn't know I could do that.
Huh, huh,
Can
yeah.
I do this? And so this moment when we're standing like 9 toes over the edge of incompetency, and we
Uh-huh.
don't actually know if we're capable of doing the next thing. We think everybody around us knows what they're doing. It turns out nobody knows what they're doing. They're all making it up as they go along.
A big
And to
secret.
me, that was both horrifying and also sort of liberating, right? It was like, well, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Like I can just be me.
Yeah.
And great. And so, I think that was the first thing, and I think the second piece that I really loved was I began to understand as I spoke to the people I spoke to for all three books, that the moments that they came alive and the moments that they were super effective for their companies, their communities, their countries were the moments when they let their freak flag fly
Yeah, I
and they
love that.
just were
Mhm,
themselves, and they were
mhm,
like, you know what, I
mhm,
am not going to be for everybody,
mm,
but boy, am I going to be for some people,
mm,
right? And if I
mhm,
can double down in the places where like what I am putting down, people are picking up, I can be so much more effective for those people than trying to be a little bit for everybody. And so just this
mhm,
like understanding that like I can be an introvert and a keynote speaker, right? I mean,
mhm, mhm,
I can be super awkward and also, you know, run marathons. Like we can be like we are made up of multiples, and the exploration of that is part of life's joy, but we don't have to hide the process, because the process, the journey is where we figure it all out. And by the
mhm,
way, there are a lot of people who are paying attention, especially leaders. They're
mhm.
paying attention to you, even if they're not actively engaging, actively talking, actively applauding, they're still watching. And I feel like we owe it to all of them to show them that we're
Mhm.
all figuring it out as we go along too.
Mhm. That it's messy and beautiful and powerful and all of the emotions rolled up into one.
It's
Yeah,
wonder hell.
yeah, it's under hell. Yeah, I mean, I really like the evolution, and I'm gonna suggest this to you listeners is, if you're starting kind of on your leadership journey or thinking that, start with Limitless. That's the way. And then understanding that Wonder Hell is like when you've hit your mark and you're in a place, that's where Wonder Hell is really, really descriptive. What was your third title again?
So the third title is actually, it was the first book I wrote in
Yeah,
2007, and it was called
yeah.
Mission Driven, and it was about transitioning from corporate to nonprofit work. And I never
Okay.
actually planned to write a book, but I got a phone call one day from Kaplan Publishing, and they were like, "So this is actually a good story." So
Huh,
they said, "Oh, so we were writing a series. We're doing one about going into nursing, one about going into teaching, and one about going into nonprofits." And we saw this blog post that you wrote, and we thought, "Do you want to do the one about going into nonprofits? Here's a advance, and we need the book in 6 months, 80,000 words. Do you want this?" And I was like, Okay.
huh.
So it turns out, Danny, that it was a blog post that I wrote, that I put on my website, that I put into Google SEO, whatever, so people could find it. I was like a self appointed expert, right? So we think we have to wait for somebody to bless us, to invite us in, to decide that we're worthy, to decide. But turns out we can just decide. Like, they're lucky I actually know what I'm talking about, that I spent 20 years in executive search for nonprofits, because it was, that blog post was 3 paragraphs long.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, the knowledge, the wisdom, the comfort follow the behavior. It's not necessarily the other way around, right? I got
Exactly.
right. Yeah, yeah. So that's good. Awesome. All right. Well, listen, we are running out of time here, but I would like to give you one last an invitation. Is there anything else that you can share that you think might be helpful for those leaders that are like, I get it, I get it, I get it. I'm still exhausted. I don't know what to do next.
Well, what I would say is you're probably not exhausted from doing too much, but you're probably exhausted from doing too much that doesn't matter. So I
Uh,
would ask you to look at your calendar,
yeah,
look at your inbox, look at your to do list, and ask yourself, is there anything on here that someone else can do?
yeah.
Because we get very distracted by action. I'm just going to check off the easy things, and we forget about impact, which are some of the harder things. And your highest and best use of your time as a leader is to do the things that only you can do.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
So look at that list. Is everything on that list stuff only you can do? And if it's not, you got to get rid of it.
You gotta get rid of it. Yeah, yeah, love that, yeah. I have as I think it's just useful to think about. I have as one of my themes this year is joyful engagement, and I'm trying not to do anything that I can't be like, this is joyfully engaging with this, and that's been a really helpful exactly what you're saying, to kind of put my calendar in a place where I'm like, I'm not doing yucky stuff. I'm doing the things that I can joyfully engage.
Exactly. And, look, we all have to do some stuff that's yucky. So, like, if
Mhm,
you're
mhm.
listening and you're like, I don't have a big team, how am I going to get rid of that thing? I don't want to do payroll. Somebody else can do it, but I have to do it. At least deprioritize it, because we're always going to find time
Exactly.
for the stuff that doesn't really light us up. You're never going to not enter payroll. Like, you're going to do it. But it comes at the, like, we end up putting it like at 9 a.m. on a Monday, like, eat the frog first, do the hardest thing. That's nonsense. Like, when do you do your very best work? I am amazing in the morning from 9 to noon. I write, I rehearse, I do all my creative stuff. In the afternoons, I do podcasts, because this is a conversation. I'm not bringing all the energy, I'm sharing the energy with you. So I'm never going to say yes to a podcast first thing in the morning, because that's stealing my gold from my job as a writer. So what, like, you also may be an
Mhm,
evening person, so like at 8 p.m. you
mhm.
might light up. What is the time when you do your very best work? Figure out what only you can do, and guard that time with your life. Like, put those times on your calendar, guard it with your life,
Mm,
and don't
mhm.
move them. Like, I have 3 blocks every week for 3 hours in the morning. And my assistant knows, like, if she needs to move Monday to Tuesday, she can, but she can never move Tuesday to next week, right? Like, it's like there are always three, even if it's not the same 3 days. So what is your gold? What is your best time? What is the stuff that only you can do? And make sure you're prioritizing that stuff, even if you have to do some of the yucky stuff.
Yeah, and protecting it. Yeah, and yeah, the yucky stuff is the means to the end. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Laura, thank you so much. This was wonderful. So appreciate it. And can you tell folks if they want to get in your universe and stay in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so my name is Laura Gassner Otting. All my good friends call me LGO. So I'm at HeyLGO on all the socials, and you can find me at lauragassnerotting.com. And my books Limitless and Wonder Hell and probably Mission Driven are sold on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere fine books are sold.
Awesome. Awesome. Laura, thank you so, so much. I look forward to continuing this conversation at another point, and it's been such a joy. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Danny.
All right, you take care. And dear listener, thank you so much for joining us for this Best Boss podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye now.